Hey, it's me from the future, and hopefully you enjoyed that first part of what ended up being a 2-hour show with me and TMV. So we're going to be rating the GMs and the managers of the teams. Who did the best job forming the best franchise team as we head into 2023?
The only thing I would say roster construction wise that I was like scratching my head at for Vitality was they let go of Batty G, who was the sub for FPX when they won in stage 1.
You know, it might sound weird, like, oh, Team Vitality, this huge like Counter-Strike org, taking people by surprise in attack shooter, but I don't really feel like a lot of people are looking at Vitality in EMEA right now.
Particularly like, and I think this will be a question going forward for a lot of teams potentially, if Chamber does get like a big nerf and like isn't, you know, the meta anymore, some of these teams I think are going to struggle a bit with that and, you know, finding their roles, and Liquid might be one of those teams. You know, what then does Yampy play, right? What is Safe your duelist? And if so, what's Yampy playing? Like, you know, and who's playing Smokes, if that's the case, right? Like, there is some questions here role-wise.
So the first part was EMEA, and this second part is going to be both the Americas and the Pacific region. So enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, let's move on to the Americas region now, TMV. And we're going to start with...
Breeze through these. No one cares.
We're going to start with Sentinels, who did one of the most interesting moves in the offseason.
Yeah, okay. Zek and Def, Sassy, Pancada, Tens, Psycho, and Kaplan as the coach. So this is a really interesting one. I don't think anyone predicted Sassy and Pancada going from Loud to Sentinels. No. That was a massive shock. If we think about where Sentinels were, obviously with the old roster and, you know, Shazam and Dapper and all those guys, you know, obviously a ton has changed. And I think Tens being the only kind of holdout makes sense, I guess, from a clout perspective.
Right.
I mean, if they, I mean, and there was rumors about them dropping Tens as well. Sentinel's clout would have gone from number 1 to like number 5 or 6 very quickly if Tens was off this roster, in my opinion. So keeping Tens makes sense. And then they've taken a risk, is what I would say, adding in the 2 Brazilian players. Obviously very talented players, but there's definitely question marks about, you know, will they integrate well into an English-speaking team? You know, how will that work overall, right? So there's definitely question marks there. Zekken, I think, super solid pickup. Was probably going to be one of the most sought-after players, I think, in NA. And then you've got Def as the IGL. And again, I think there's question marks about Def overall, and not necessarily his play level for an IGL, but obviously he was co-IGLing with Aaron for Acend, so, you know, he's going to have to take up that mantle. And I think a big question mark that a lot of people haven't brought up is that I imagine that Sassy will be kind of, you know, that secondary IGL, that kind of, you know, player that they can put together. Like, you've got this relationship between Def and Sassy, you know, who have come from very different backgrounds, you know, who have just been put onto a team. They don't know each other. And I assume that, you know, the relationship between them is going to need to be pretty good, you know, to try and work out the solutions, because the rest of this team is pretty young. And so, you know, those two as the experienced heads, basically they can't be clashing, in my opinion, if this team is going to go in the right direction. And Sassy seems like a nice guy, so I don't think it's likely that they will clash. But, you know, if they aren't on the same page, it could lead to some tension.
Yeah, definitely. As far as like just pure GM movement, I think that Sentinels, I mean, they went from being like probably the most unstructured team out of anyone that was like sort of in that tier 2, tier 1 level. They go out, they get Psycho, they get Kaplan. Their first 2 signings are coaches. Then they go ahead and pick up the corresponding IGL for Psycho, which is Def. They pick up Zekken, obviously probably the most talented young player in North America. Like when I'm talking, you know, 17, 18 years old. And then the Sassy Pancada move, it's very interesting. They go out and they get some more champions, you know, to add to their roster. I will say one thing that's interesting is you mentioned Def was co-IGLing. Sassy was also kind of co-IGLing. I know that Sadaka was like the main IGL, but I do know that Sassy was also like a very strong voice on that team. So maybe it's kind of the same dynamic. I don't really know. We'll see. Also, what's happening with Sick? He's technically on the roster as the sixth
their
man.
sub, yeah. Which is
Yeah,
kind of weird. We'll get into it with another team later down the line as well. But obviously, Sick is a super talented player, so it's kind of one of them situations where if someone isn't doing that well on the team, and Sick's like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready to play again,"
right.
He's like a super flexible, really good player. It's like,
right.
that could cause some potential problems. It could be a good solution as well, though.
Yeah, it could be a great solution if, let's say, like Pancata doesn't acclimate well to like moving to LA and you know being in North America, or if Zekin, I don't know, gets sick or has to like go to school or something. I don't really know, but Sick can fit into both of those roles, which is very, very good. But also, it's like you're sitting on the sidelines, you're watching this team play. Maybe they're not doing super well. Like, when does that tension reach a point where you're like, dude, put me in or get me off this team because I want to play?
Yeah.
But definitely the most interesting move out of any of the North American teams, I would say.
And clout wise, very good. You got the mix of the anti clout in Xset, and so you keep tens. You bring in the loud guys. You get the Brazilian clout as well. They keep the clout. Yeah. Sentinels were gonna do one thing. It was keep the clout.
Totally. Okay. Before we move on, I just have to ask, what do you think is going to happen with tens this year? Is he going to flourish under better IGLing or more structure, or is he just going to continue to be this player that's like, we know the potential is there, but it never gets realized?
I think Sentinels are gonna be like a good but not great team, and I think Tens will do better than he was before, but maybe not like the first international LAN where he's carrying, and he'll be kind of in between, and he won't be like the best like op player, but he'll be good, and so everyone will just be complaining about like not knowing where Tens is. That's what I see. Just the debate continues on forever because he's kind of like doing well but not amazing.
No resolution then. Okay, great. Okay, moving on to NRG, the other highly clouded org, going pretty big with their free agent signings. They went out and they got Victor FNS Crashies to add to Som, who stayed on as the only player from their original roster. They brought in Chet, and they also went across the pond and grabbed Artis to fill their op role. So we've got essentially Optic plus Artis plus Som. What do you think?
I think that this team, when I did my power rankings of the thing, I put them in S tier, and my Twitch chat was going mad. Like, oh, they're not S tier, and I don't get it at all. Like, you've got the core and the coach from the best team, like, last year. And you, like, Artis is, like, people obviously, oh, you've lost the best player in the world, though, and yay. True. Perhaps true. But Artis is, like, at least a top 5, in that role. So it's not like you've got a massive downgrade. Like, Artis is still about that well. And I think Artis is going to be a massive hit, by the way. I think he fits, like we talked about culture with like CNED and, will he fit into kind of that thing? Artis is like you could have argued that Ye didn't really fit the old Optic culture of like, the rest of Optic seemed to have that bit of like, cockiness to them of like, we are the best. And Ye was just kind of there, happy, smiling along. Like, Artis like fits that. Like, he fit, like, now the whole team is going to be like, we are the best, right? They are going to make themselves like the villains and, make themselves like, we know we're better than you. We are going to stomp you. And that's going to be so entertaining to watch. I literally cannot wait to see it. There might be some, communication problems with Artis because he obviously speaks Scouse. And so I doubt FNS will be able to understand what he's saying half the time, but that's just going to be funny from the outside. Look, I think other things like Sentinels, like we'll get into C9 as well, that's might have taken the headlines away a bit from NRG. I think actually once the games start and once Artis and FNS start speaking about who they're playing, this team is going to be electric. I think they're going to do really well, NRG, in terms of just like people are going to either hate or love them. And that's a good spot to be, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Especially in one of these kind of franchise leagues, you need somebody that's gonna just kind of like generate, social media impressions.
Yeah,
Everybody is either gonna want to show up and see them win or lose.
yeah,
They're kind of like that boxer that is really good, but everybody kind of dislikes because
yeah,
of the attitude or whatever. Um, Sam, I think, is probably the biggest question mark for
yeah.
most people, just because he's never really kind of had that international success.
Hmm.
Um, and I have been, a little bit of on that train of doubting whether just because he's a very popular streamer. He's very
Hmm.
um, well known for just kind of like being funny and obviously being very skilled. But I didn't really see him kind of like carry NRG that much last
Hmm.
year. I feel like he was somewhat inconsistent. But
Yeah.
taking him off of being that jet entry role in this case, because now they have Victor and Artist to do it, and putting him on smokes,
Hmm.
that actually makes a lot of sense to me. I can see him being very much like the Marv of this team, because you take
Yeah.
sort of duelist sensibilities, you put it on a role that is forced to play a bit more supportive, but also needs to be a playmaker, and you end up with a pretty good combination. So I'm actually pretty high on this team as well.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Moving on, we go to MIBR, and this is going to be kind of unconfirmed, but most likely to be the team, which is going to be JZZ, Muriz, FRZ, RGLM, and Heat, with Bazooka as the coach, the former Loud coach, coming over to MIBR. Um, this team, really don't know what to think about it. I'm going to be perfectly honest. We've got incredible talent, as most of these Brazilian players that are in franchising are, just like heavy firepower, very, very strong mechanics, aggression, utility usage. And we have maybe the best former of structure as far as the Brazilian team goes with Bazooka. But how do these players gel together? I'm really, really not sure. I don't really know where to go with this one.
Yeah, to me, a lot of it falls onto the Mariz, who's down here as the IGL. Um, I don't know if Mariz is a good IGL or not, but like you say, I think a lot of it comes down to like knowing all Brazilian teams, like the talent of firepower will be there. And I actually know it from some of the players as well, that it definitely will be there. From guys like Heat in particular, like the talent will be there. Will the structure be there? Will be the question, as you say. BZK obviously showed that he could do it with Loud. But I guess it will be revealed, was that his doing, or was that Sadek and Sassy's doing, more
Right.
so or less? I guess we'll see. And then can Mariz do this as well with a team? I don't know. And so yeah, question marks for sure. Um, Again, it's kind of an interesting thing where there are 3 Brazilian orgs, and 2 Brazilian players have gone. 2 of the better Brazilian players have gone to a non-Brazilian org, like we were talking about with Turkish teams. And so you're still going down the route of the Brazilian org, which I think probably makes sense for them, because it would be weird for a team named Made in Brazil to go,
Right.
and form form a more international team. But again, we're talking about, like, obviously there is a bigger player pool to bring from Brazil than there is Turkey. Um, but again, will it be able to compete with the very best teams? Don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm probably, I would say, MIBR, as far as just hot takes, bottom three team for me in North America. But
Mm,
that's just based on the fact that I don't know if they're going to have the structure to compete with some of these other teams.
mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on to another Brazilian org, which is Loud. Last season's champions. Obviously, we just talked about, they lost Saucy Pancada and Bazooka, their coach, but they have put together a new team, which is Auspice, Sadhawk staying on, Les staying on as well. They're adding in Kalanzine, Tuiz, and they've brought in Fraud, uh, formerly of 100 Thieves. No, formerly, who did Fraud coach initially? Do you remember?
I do not remember, but I'll just speak about this Loud team because I'm super excited about them. I
T1 Beast Coast
T1
Pioneers.
T1. I really really hope for Loud that they don't view this as a short-term thing, because Aspas, Les, Kaunzine, Toys, I don't think any of them are over 20. Is Aspas over 20? Either
He
way,
was
they're all
19. Yeah.
they're all young. And then there's Sadek, right? Loud have a chance, in my opinion, if they keep those 4 young players together, they legitimately could be playing together in 5 years' time. You know, maybe Sadek's retired by then, you know, and they replace him with someone else. But the other 4 could legitimately just stay together. Like, I really, really hope that they just view this as a, like, long-term project with those 4 players of just, like, you know, getting them in a system, because the player talent that they have, and they're all so young, is just incredible. Like, they could just be, like, dominating tournaments for times to come. And it might take a bit of a time, you know, with the loss of Sassy and Pancada. You know, you've lost some of that experience in the team, so I think a lot more weight is being put on Sadek's shoulders to manage it all. But give this team, like, in my mind, if I was Loud, I wouldn't, at the first tournaments in Sao Paulo, which honestly might be a detriment to them because there's going to be a lot of expectation on them to perform right now. But if I was them, I'd just be so patient, and I'd be so excited for the future, because we've just got, like, we've got some of the best young players in the world, like, already. We know that with Aspas and Les. We're adding in 2 really good young players as well, that if they can live up to their potential, will be incredible players. And then we just have a team for the next X amount of years that could just dominate the scene forever, like, just for ages. Like, they're just so young. Look, they need to add in 1 player potentially if Sadek ever retired. That could just be insane. So I'm super high on this Loud roster. Even if it doesn't go super well at the start, I think losing Sassy and Pancada obviously is pretty sad. But to me, like, keeping Aspas and Les, you know, your young players from the team, you know, and your IGL, like, if you only had the money to afford to keep 3 of them, I think they kept the right 3, personally. So, yeah, I'm super high on what Loud did overall.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, the more you talk about it, the more I'm on board with that. You're talking like potential dynasty characteristics here.
Not straight away,
yeah, I mean,
but
yeah, right. Because Kaozin's 17. Is it Toys or
I think
Toys?
it's Toys is what I was told.
Toys.
He's 19.
Okay. 19, yeah, less 18, 19, Aspas 19, 20, something like that. And we've seen what Sadek has been able to do with developing young talent. You know, obviously we can't give him all of the credit, but certainly plays a role in that. I mean, I have been working with just like a free agent North American team in my spare time, and the IGL, as far as like their influence over the players in their team, is like so important. And so if you have that piece, I could see this team being incredibly good. Fraud is a well-known, highly experienced coach with a lot of sort of track record of building structure and helping players develop as well. We haven't seen a lot of that in Valorant, but definitely coming from Counter-Strike, I believe he's pretty highly respected as far as I understand. So yeah, I'm actually very excited to see this Loud team. I think, you know, it's always hard when you have to let superstars go, just because it's, you know, in sports, like, you win a championship, people are going to want your players, and they're also going to want more money. And so you just are faced with like kind of a lose-lose situation where you're going to have to lose something. And I think you might be right. If you had to let 2 players go, Sassy, Benkata, as great as they are, makes a lot of sense.
Long term, it makes the most sense.
It does make a lot of sense. All right, Loud, you know, hats off to you guys for managing that tough situation. All right, let's move on to Leviatan, sort of the breakout team from last year in South America, and they made some pretty big moves this year.
Oh, I'm a massive Leviatan fan. I'm a simp for Leviatan. They kept King, Shy, Taco. They added in as Mazzino, and then Kesnet as well. Now, the thing for me, and I've said this before about Leviatan as well, there's just no way that Kesnet is the sub. There's just no way. It just doesn't work. Your best player is not your sub. C9 aren't going to bench EA. Like, I'm just going to say it. And Leviatan, you know, Kesnet was listed as kind of the sub, the sixth man to the roster. There's no way he's the sub. I know people will say, well, you know, King plays Raze, Kesnet plays Raze. Well, King could play something else. Okay, he's the IGL. You know,
You're
it
kicked
might
off
help,
your
to be
role.
honest. It might help him, you know, to IGL from not playing Raze, right? If he's IGLing, it might help to play a, you know, more passive supportive role. And King is good enough to do it because King's an incredible player as well. But Kesnet is truly insane. And so I don't know who is going to have to ride the bench, but if it's Kesnet, I'm going to lose my mind at this team. Okay? If it's not, I'm so high on this team. I legit think that this team is good enough to win Sao Paulo. Legit.
Wow.
And
okay.
other people won't be as high on them. That's assuming Kesnet isn't on the bench. If he is, as I said, I'm going to lose my mind.
All right. Well, I'm gonna press you. Who do you pull off the quote unquote starting roster to replace with Kesnet?
You know, that is tough. That is tough. That is honestly really, really tough because there might be a role thing going on as well here with this team that we'll have to try and figure out. To me, it's obviously it's not King because he's your IGL, right? So King's playing, right? Kesnet is playing the duelist role. And maybe an opping role as well. So you like, do you want to bench Taco? But then Taco's probably your next best player. So it's like, I don't really want to bench Taco either. If he's our next best player. So it's like, I don't really want to bench Taco. And then you've got the other three guys where it's like, maybe we could bench them, but then our roles kind of don't work. It's a very difficult question to actually answer what I would do. Because if you bring in Kesnet and you have Taco and you have King, your roles are kind of a bit maybe wonky in terms of like it might not all work together. Those other three guys like are kind of, you know, building that role together. So look, it's weird. I don't know, you know, maybe they could teach Taco to, I don't know, play. He did play a bit of Sky, I think, at one point, but you know, maybe they could teach him to play that and then it would be a bit easier. But just play Kesnet. That's all I'm gonna say. Just play him. Let King play anything. King seems like a pretty flexible player. Just let him play anything else. Kesnet, get onto that duelist. Go crazy and just win games that no one expects you to. I love this team. And I love Onora as a coach as well. That's another big part of it. They kept Onora as coach. I think he's I think he's the guy that has actually I can say has proven to be one of the best coaches in Valorant. Because with all the other coaches, it's like they've like, you know, if we take other coaches like Doom Bros or Mini from Fnatic, right? They've only been with one team. Or one core of a team.
Right.
So it's like difficult to know how much are they really putting in and how much is just the players being good. Whereas with Honor, he went from KRÜ, made them a really good team, went to Leviatan, made them a really good team.
Yep.
Like he has proven it's him. Like he can make you a good team. And so add that into this as well. And I'm feeling good.
Yeah. I also think that this could be one of the best teams in the region and potentially in the world next year. If I am going to be honest, I think Nazor is probably gone from the starting roster. He's mostly just a Sova player.
Yeah.
Just a Sova player. I don't mean it like that, but pretty much just played Sova last year.
Yeah. Shy was playing a lot of Fade anyway.
Yeah, and I think what you do here is you have King probably take over that Sova role. I mean, that's where most IGLs end up is in this, you know, info initiator supportive role.
Mm-hmm.
You put Kesnet on duelist. You have Taco as your opper. Mm-hmm. Kesnet plays like the KO Raze stuff.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I think that Mazzino might actually be my favorite player from KRÜ. I think he might even be the best player from KRÜ. As good as Kesnet is, I think Mazzino is like responsible for more of KRÜ's success than even Kesnet was last year.
Mr. Icebox, we call him on my channel.
Incredible Sage on Icebox. Just incredible player in general. And then they also have that connection with Owner as well, right? You've got Mazzino and Kesnet who've played with Owner before. You've got Taco Shy King who played with Owner. Nazar is kind of like the odd one out in that equation. He does share a nationality with Owner, but at the same time, it's like maybe that's not enough. I am very curious to see whether this Kesnet on the bench is actually real or not. But either way, I think this team has very, very high potential. So I'm excited for it.
100%.
Okay, moving on to KRÜ Esports. This is an interesting one.
That's the noise I would make.
That's not a good sound.
That's not a good sound, no, because kind of opposite to Leviatan, who, as you said, in my opinion, did get KRÜ's best two players.
Yep.
KRÜ just lost their best 2 players. And
Yep.
the replacements aren't bad, but KRÜ, like if we just do it, the swap that they had, they bring in Melsa from Leviatan, and Melsa was a player who had flashes and definitely is worth a slot in like a tier 1 team. He's proven he's good enough to deserve a slot, but was he
Very
one of
good.
Leviatan's best players? Probably not, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like they got your best 2 players, and you got a player who's definitely worth being in this level, but wasn't one of their best players. Like, it's just I don't see it. I just don't see it. You've lost your best 2 players, and even if the replacements do come in and do pretty well, this was a team that was already like, unlike Leviatan from last year, who were like seemed like they were building something, and they showed that they could beat good teams. They beat Paper Rex 2-0 at champs. Got out of groups. It looked like a good team. For KRÜ, did they get out of groups? I mean, they still went to all the international tournaments, but I don't think they got out of the
Right.
groups in any of them. It's like they weren't a team that were progressing, right, from throughout the year. They were just the same. They were good enough to get to tournaments and then go out in groups. Whereas Leviatan, I felt like, there was more there.
Yeah, and their pickups of Davey S and Jandy and Melser. I mean, all 3 players. I think Jandy was probably one of the best players on FURIA. He was on FURIA right before?
Yeah.
FURIA Ninjas in Pajamas, and then Davey S, I believe, was like the kind of like the most touted player from
like the North.
Zolos Laser.
Yeah, the North Latam.
Yeah, the North Latam. So they certainly brought in like firepower, but is it enough to replace Kesmet Mazzino? I think there's also maybe some role issues here, because I believe Jandi is kind of like an opper to some extent. Nags has also been the opper, but he's also been like a very inconsistent opper. Yeah, I definitely have some questions about this one. Melser did prove to be one of the best clutch players, I will say, at Champion. So there is that.
Yeah.
But I think I'm with you. This is probably going to be towards the bottom. They certainly could grow together, but I don't have super high expectations for them. And if we're talking purely from like a GM perspective, you're losing your best players, and you're not really signing anybody that people are like, yeah, KRÜ,
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, moving on to FURIA, the 3rd Brazilian team, with a roster of DGZin, Mazin, MW0, Khalil, and Quick, with Carlau as their coach. Fairly excited for this team, honestly. Fairly excited. I'm always down to watch some MW0 play. I think that FURIA, they had a very interesting like last season. I feel like they got to international events and then they went out very early, but they looked dangerous. They looked dangerous in all the events that I watched them. They lost to Fnatic and DRX at Champions, which is like, you can't really blame them for those 2 losses, and they weren't complete blowouts either. And then they kept a decent amount of their former roster with DJZin, Khalil, Mazin, and Quick. And then they brought in MW0, who is, up there as far as like the top firepower, top kind of clout signings as well for Brazilian players. I'm pretty down with this. I think teams that have shown good potential, signing one player that they think will kind of put them over the edge is a pretty good way to go into the next season, if you're fairly confident that what you have as your core is like going in the right direction. And for me, FURIA was going in the right direction last year. They just didn't quite get there in time. So I'm curious to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought you were going to be a bit more down on FURIA, but I'm totally there with you where look, do I expect them to be like at the very tippity top of like, competing for the tournament win? No. But do I think that this is a team with like potential that, could surprise? I wouldn't be shocked if people thought, FURIA, they're going to be like an easy win, for a lot of these teams. I don't think that'll be the case at all. As you said, I think they came incredibly close against. I mean, they lost the 12-4. That's got to be an absolute heartbreaker versus the RX on Acend.
Yep.
And then they lost a 13-11 in map 3 on Haven. You change like just a couple gunfights in that game, and they beat Fnatic and knocked them out. And you probably look at FURIA in a very different light. So yeah, I am totally with you, and I also think teams that keep their core together are gonna have an advantage, particularly early on. And so I wouldn't be shocked. Home crowd, you've kept your core. You were already kind of going in the right direction. It seemed you weren't too far away from competing with the likes of Fnatic, TRX, very good teams. I wouldn't be surprised if they did pretty well, particularly the first Sao Paulo tournament with all those factors kind of going in their favor. I think I'm totally with you. Maybe they, to get like to the very top, would need to make maybe a change or two again, and upgrade if they could, if it was available to them. But overall, I think, solid job. I think for FURIA and Made in Brazil, again, there's that thing I had with the Turkish teams where it would have been pretty cool if you could have signed Sassy and Pancada, rather than letting him go to Sentinels. That would have been pretty sick for those two teams. But outside of doing that, I can't really complain at what they've done.
Yeah, totally. All right, let's move on to the North American orgs. Aside from NRG and Sentinels, we've got Evil Geniuses, Cloud9, and 100 Thieves. Let's go ahead and start with Evil Geniuses, who were probably the quietest org out of everyone in the off season, and now we have their roster confirmed. Right? They put out an announcement video. And their roster ends up being Boostio, Ethan, BCJ, Calm, Apoth, Reformed, and Jogamo for a 7-player roster with Potter as the coach and Lynn as the assistant coach, still coming in from last year.
And they announced that, well, in the video it was teased that they wanted a 10-man roster.
They did say that.
Now, I made a video about that today.
Okay.
And some of the benefits, I think, of having a 10-man roster and why I think it's quite a clever idea in reality. The main benefit for me of having a 10-man roster is that it completely changes the way that you can practice. You don't have to scrim against other teams. You can in-house scrim. And in an in-house scrim, you can basically do what you want, and you can manipulate it however you want. And you can like say, today we're only going to work on our, B-site XX on this map. And just work on it all the time. Oh, we're going to do an A retake, but we're going to do a 5v5. We're going to try, 10 rounds of 5v5, 10 rounds of 4v4, 10 rounds of 3v3, and just keep doing it in a 10-man roster. Whereas, you couldn't go into a scrim and be like, hey, guys, can we just set this up so that we can get like a 2v2, on the B site? We want the spike planted here, by the way. And we, can you just set this up for us? They'd probably just like, let us just play. Whereas EG can do that, and I think that is super, super, super valuable. Like, as someone who's done coaching, I've got a degree in coaching, like being able to like be very specific with the things that you are working on, and not just with like, oh, when we hit B, we need to make sure we're doing this. Like, no, you can go over it time and time and time again, in like a controlled environment. I think is super valuable and like will actually help these players get a lot better if they do go down the 10-man roster route. Obviously, with the actual team themselves, and we don't know 3 of the players if they do go down that road. Adding BCJ and Ethan, solid players, good players. Obviously, I think there still is kind of when we compare to the other NA rosters, let's say, perhaps the name value, very EG of them, the names maybe aren't quite there. They don't have that like superstar that they can, really like, oh, we've got Ye, oh, we've got, Cryo
Tens.
or Zekken or, Tens or whoever, right? Like, they don't have that. So maybe that's something that's lacking, but if they do go down a 10-man roster route, I'm kind of into it for that reason that I mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very interesting point, and I kind of wonder what the practice looks like. Are they going to mix up the teams?
Yeah,
like if they're practicing against each other and come out with like the top 5 that kind of work together the best? Because we do have, serious role overlap here, right?
Yeah.
We've got BCJ who plays the Initiators, the Sova, the Smokes. We got Calm who plays the Sova, the Sentinels. We've got Ethan who plays the Initiators, the Smokes. We've got Apoth who plays the Smokes, the Sentinels. We've got Reformed who plays the Sentinels. It's like, okay, how is this going to work?
Everyone's just going to master one agent.
Right. Yeah, just swap them in and out.
You only play Cypher.
There's no way. But I mean, also with a bigger roster, you know, there's something in real sports that I don't really feel like people maybe have grasped in esports, which is the hunger of knowing that somebody is coming for your job all the time to motivate you to play harder and practice harder and become a better player. That is a very real thing that perhaps Evil Geniuses is trying to implement here, where it's like, you want to be a franchise player, you better be outworking the guys, not just in the free agent pool, but also on your team just to keep your job. And that might sound kind of brutal, but that's literally how it is in real sports all the time. So definitely an interesting idea from Evil Geniuses. And, you know, from a GM perspective, like, yeah, they didn't go out and spend a ton of money getting crazy signings, but I think they picked up some pretty solid pieces. I do think the experience from somebody like Ethan, very valuable. You know, obviously played with 100 Thieves, has tons of CS experience. BCJ worked in a very, very well-oiled machine system over on Acend and brings quite a bit of experience in leadership as well. You know, will Boostio continue to develop as an incredible Opera and IGL? I'm very interested to see how this team fits together. Maybe one of the most interesting teams to watch in North America, in my opinion. Okay, Cloud9. We're finally there. Cloud9. They have picked up Yay. They have secured the largest signing out of any region in the offseason. And they have also brought in MCE as their coach, replacing Autumn, who is now in Korea. They also brought in Zelsis. So the final roster is Leaf, Zelsis, Zeppa, Vanity, and Yay. Tell me about Cloud9, TMB.
I mean, they signed Yay. Whoever signed Yay, that's like just a big tick. You know, whoever's going to win the Yay race, like, obviously you just get points for that automatically. Again, this is an interesting one. Like, you know, if we're talking role-wise, I suspect Leaf is probably going to play, like, if they are going to play Killjoy Cypher, again, particularly if Chamber gets nerfed, there could be some problems for this team, like, role-wise. You know, who plays Raze in this team? You think Zelsis does? But then Leaf might, and then it does. What's Yay playing? If Chamber gets nerfed, and like, let's say we're playing Bind, and no one plays Chamber on Bind anymore because he got heavily nerfed, what are they doing? Like, it's kind of a bit. They have role problems. That's what I'm gonna say. If Chamber gets nerfed, I think they have role problems. But it's gonna be interesting. It's definitely gonna be interesting to see, because they're gonna have a lot of expectation on them. And C9 last year underperformed. That might honestly be being nice to them, saying they underperformed. But, you know, they didn't do great. And so, you know, look, they're all really talented players. I really like Vanity as an IGL. I like MC as a coach. Yay and Zelsis are really good players. Like, on paper, it all looks fine, right? It all looks really good, and they should just be smooth sailing. Away we go. One of the best teams in the world. Problem is, it doesn't always work like that, and not everyone can be the best team in the world, and that's what every team will be thinking at this point. Oh yeah, we'll be competing. And so if C9, again, if it doesn't work for whatever reason, right, if there are role problems, if there are, you know, if there is a big Chamber nerf and Yay isn't playing, like, Yay has pretty much, you know, for the most part, only played, like, Jet and Chamber. So if he's forced to do something else and it doesn't quite work, there could be problems for this team. But then again, they could just absolutely be the best team in the world, and I wouldn't be shocked either. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about Leaf. He's played Viper and like kind of he's a very, very versatile player. Yeah, he's played a bunch of random stuff. I think the biggest question for me here is the Sova role, because I think they're still hurting from losing Zeta. Because I don't really know. They've moved mostly to playing Fade, which is what Zeppa has been playing, and then Zelsis kind of goes into that sort of like secondary flex duelist with like the KOs and the Rays and that kind of stuff. Vanity obviously playing Smokes, but when Fade gets nerfed, which is going to happen, and as the meta continues to change and Sova becomes more relevant and Sky becomes more relevant, maybe even Info Initiators as a whole kind of fall off a bit. Where does this team stand as far as that? I think a lot of the pressure is going to end up probably on Zeppa and Leaf to kind of like juggle that and see who can step into that role. And yeah, this team has incredible firepower. And I think the addition of MCE rejoining Vanity and Leaf and Zeppa, who he coached in Counter-Strike, is pretty cool. So the dynamic should be there, but also you're not wrong. Cloud9 did have a little bit of a history of slightly underperforming where people thought they were going to be. And now the expectations are even higher with the signing of Ye. So I think they obviously did a great job signing Ye. I think bringing in Zelsus is a solid pickup as well. But I am a little bit curious to see how this team actually comes together. Okay, 100 Thieves. The hoodie org of all hoodie orgs, the team that made one move in the offseason, signing Cryo, adding it to their it's sort of like a belated signing, right? Everybody thought they were going to get Cryo initially before he went to Acend. And so it's just by way of Acend, he has now joined 100 Thieves. They finally got the superstar opper that they've always needed. No offense to Will. He actually turned out to be kind of a Lanimal, but online he was pretty inconsistent, and CryoCells is simply one of the best players in that role in the world. And now 100 Thieves have that role on lockdown, adding it to Asuna, Derek, Bang, and Stellar. Obviously, Sean Guerra's stepped away from coaching as well. Mike's HC stepping into the head coach role. This is sort of the same type of thing, right, TMV, where it's you have your core, they're well established, they're going in the right direction last year, and then you bring in a superstar player, basically just like a direct one-for-one upgrade in that particular role. They should be in a pretty great spot going into 2023. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think they've been. It's almost kind of weird because 100 Thieves are like one of the biggest like clout orgs, but they're kind of being, I think, slept on a bit. Like in terms of obviously a lot of other teams, Sentinels and C9 got Ye and NRG have got the Optic Core. Like everyone's kind of going crazy about the other NA orgs, and 100 Thieves. It's just like we were going, like you say, going in the right direction anyway, and then we just made we added in like a really really talented player. Like if they just carry on their kind of trajectory of like, they're just slowly heading in that upward trajectory, and then Cryo bumps them up even more, like it wouldn't be a shock if they, went really, really deep at Sao Paulo. Winning maybe it would be a bit of a shock, but like, going to like the top 3 or something, like I wouldn't be that surprised if they did that. But I feel like no one's really talking about that, right? Everyone's just kind of like, oh yeah, 100 Thieves, they're good. They're in that like good tier of teams. Adding Cryo, good. Everything else, pretty good. Away we go, right? And that's, I don't know. It feels a bit boring, to be honest, to talk about 100 Thieves. They're just kind of like, everything seems to be going. They're just continuing on this like steady climb, it feels like.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what else could they have really done? I remember speculating early on, are they going to bring in like an FNS or something like that? But honestly, I think that they handled the offseason pretty well. And as quote unquote boring as it might be, it's all right. Sometimes you don't need to make the big moves.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready for Pacific? Do we need to take a little break, or should we just get right into it?
I'm ready. Let's power through.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna start with Zeta Division, going from Clout Org to Clout Org, the biggest Clout Org in Japan, and probably my favorite team from all of last year.
Oh well, that's an easy thing to say. But yeah, this one we don't need to spend too much time on this one because everything's the same. They just added in a sub player. They have the same 5 that we all know and love, and and that's where they'll be. I think they'll be a team. Obviously, they were a bit up and down last year. I mean, they kind of got a bit unfortunate in their group at Champs. They lost to Loud twice, which it's no like great problem for them, right? You lost to the eventual winners of the tournament twice, like fair enough. So yeah, I think they'll just be in that kind of like, I'd say like worldwide, I think they'd be like a mid-table team. in terms of Pacific, I think they could do a little better because I think particularly with this region, like for some of the teams, I think they're just a bit better than some of the teams, and then I think that they're like they have more structure than some of these other rosters that are all coming together. So I think they have an advantage where maybe than other a couple teams they could be like you could argue they're the third best team in Pacific. So I think things look good, for them, and they haven't really changed anything, and I don't think there was a reason to. I know and like these players, so I'm happy to see them carry on.
Yeah, I guess my one question is was there a move that they could have made to actually get better as a team?
Mm.
Um, I think they probably surprised a lot of people as far as like how good their firepower actually was. I think there
Mm.
were a couple teams that maybe outmatched them a little bit.
Yeah.
They had a little inconsistency from players like Depp and 10. Their sub signing is like a smokes specialist, particularly Brimstone and Omen. I believe that's like all Barca really played when he was with the old Zeta Division. But if they were gonna make any upgrades, it's hard for me to really see what that would be.
Yeah.
As far as Japanese players, you could argue maybe a couple of the players from North Epsion were as good, but I really
Yeah.
don't
I don't know if they
know
were
if there
better.
was anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think to me
And
a
then you
big
have to
thing.
look at
Oh,
like
sorry.
Korea, and maybe it's like
Yeah.
who are they going to get? Maybe they could take somebody from the T1 squad that we'll talk about in a little bit,
Yeah.
but I really don't know.
I think to me the big thing that happened with Zeta as well, from Reykjavik to Champs, they literally did like the biggest 180 you could do in terms of style. They were the slowest team at Reykjavik,
Mhm.
and they played really slow. And then at Champs, they turned up with double duelist on like every map. And I was like, what
Right.
is going on? Like, so I don't know if they're going to continue down that road, if they think that that's a good way of going, or whether they swap, back to their old slow style. I kind of hope that they would stop, swap back to their slow style because I think it worked pretty well for them as a team. And I think it gave them a bit of an advantage that I feel like there's a lot of teams, particularly in the Pacific region, that play pretty fast. And so I think
Right.
for them, if they do go to that super slow guild-esque style, that might help them because they'll be different to everyone else, and people won't be used to it. So that's kind of what I would say to going forward. But I mean, yeah, GM wise, I guess well done. You just kept it the same.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and they I think it seems like they're maybe even trying something out last year with being that faster team,
Hmm.
and if they can have both of those as options to them,
Yeah.
then they become very dangerous, right? And they've shown themselves to be a team that can develop very, very quickly and adapt to what's going on. So maybe they start out a little slow next year, maybe they lose the first match, something like that, but I could see them building up to be one of the strongest teams in the region over the course of the season. All right, let's talk about Paper Rex, everybody else's favorite team from the
Yeah,
Asia
that
Pacific
this would be
region.
my favorite team of last year.
Hmm.
Um, and look, it's Paper Rex. They've kept everything the same. They added a sub. I think Paper Rex are quite a small org. I remember watching an interview
Yeah.
with the coach, Alex, saying that he was just on his own, like coaching. Like he was just like doing everything, like
Uh,
preparing everything, doing everything. I hope for his sake that he's got some help now. I don't know if that's been announced or if he does or not, but I just hope that considering that now they're in this franchising league, you get the extra money or whatever. I really do hope that they sign some extra coaches for them because I think that that's what they might need to propel themselves, right? I think again, Paper Rex are like I would put in the 100 Thieves bucket where it's kind of like you haven't really changed anything or changed much, and maybe people are looking at all these shiny new rosters or looking at other teams that they didn't finish at champs as well as they did for Copenhagen, so they're coming off of maybe a downswing. But as a team, like they have to surely be thinking like we need to be like competing to win Sao
yeah.
Paulo. Like that's I assume what they're thinking as a team because they're obviously good enough. And they still have their super unique style, and I think that fits them. And I think I like that maybe with a new map coming out or new agents coming out, the way that because they're just so unique. Like anytime something new comes out, I think it benefits Paper Rex because they'll find ways to use it that other people have never seen before.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I think by the time we get to Sao Paulo, you know, maybe there's an extra map in the game, maybe there's an extra agent or two in the game as well that people haven't seen properly before that they can implement and, you know, go crazy with and exploit. Maybe they can. I think, you know, I mean, they just had to keep it together because it would have been a mistake otherwise. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see what they can do. I love this team.
Yeah, I also love this team. I think, again, it's one of those situations like Zeta where it's like, what do you actually upgrade? You know,
Yeah.
everybody has proven themselves on an international stage. They look like a team that very clearly could win an international tournament. You know, if certain games had gone slightly differently. I think the one concern I do have for this team is that they are a very sort of like creative setup, set play based team where a lot of what was winning them games were sort of like, I don't really want to say gimmicks, but just like well thought out set plays that are like complicated and kind of like extensive in the amount of utility that they're using to do things. And if they're playing in a weekly league structure, like how much do they have to give away each week, and how much is there for other teams to study to prep for them?
How many ideas do you have?
Exactly, and especially if what you're saying is true, where it's like only Alex and you know Benkai and the team working on this stuff, is there enough time and energy to like rethink how you approach maps from week to week enough to where teams aren't just like full anti-stratting you? But yeah, I mean, as far as like GM, like good job. You weren't really going to do anything anyway. You know, keep putting out cool jerseys and just let the team like market themselves with their great personalities. So I'm down for that. Okay, let's move on to Team Secret, a team that has a lot of clout in terms of their other games. Like this is a huge Dota org. They have expanded into, I think they have like 15, 16, 17 teams, something like that across different esports. And they came out pretty hot last year and then just disappeared. So now this year, it looks like they have a roster of Dubstep, Jesse Vash, Envy, Borkum, and Jeremy, which is essentially the roster that they had last year, with the exception of bringing in Envy. I think Jeremy was their sub.
Yes.
For some part of last year.
They had a 6-man roster, I think.
Right? Yeah, Wits, I think, was their other player, and Jeremy kind of like took over his role. So kind of an interesting team. Envy comes over from Oasis Gaming, which was one of the sort of like the upstart tier 2, tier 3 teams, playing Fade and Viper and kind of supportive roles. Where do you see this team landing, and did they do enough to get better?
In my opinion, no. I think it's obviously interesting for the Southeast Asian teams, like, and we'll get into that with RRQ as well. Like, you know, like picking a country and being like, we are the representative of, you know, X country within Southeast Asia, and you know, it's pretty clear what Team Secret have gone for here. But yeah, I just don't see it, to be honest, for this team. Like, you know, if you weren't competitive like before last year, I mean, like, is keeping it the same. And maybe Envy is a really good player, I don't know, but I just don't know. And the thing is, for Team Secret as well, you know, I talked about the nationalities and stuff. Like, they're a Filipino team. I believe that a lot of people speak English in the Philippines, right?
Everybody pretty much.
Exactly. So it's like they had options as well. You know, they could have brought in a player from NA if they wanted to. You know, they could have pretty much brought in a player from anywhere, because, you know, I don't know, but I assume that they could speak English. All of them could speak English, I'm going to assume. And so, you know, that wouldn't be a problem. Like, they could have been potentially really creative if they wanted to. And I guess that they wanted to keep that identity, but I think they could have kept that identity, as we've seen with other teams. If, you know, you just have like maybe a couple players from the Philippines, right? People will still see you as the Filipino team. You know, if you just kept like your favorite of the players, or whoever you think your best players are, and go from there, and you could have maybe built a bit of a monster. So I think there was other potentials, but clearly they've just gone down the route of, let's just try and build the best Filipino team that we can. And I guess maybe they've done that, but I don't know.
Yeah, another really interesting thing is, you know, and as somebody who's on my last legs in life, I mean, not really, but I'm older in the esports scene. I'm in my 30s. some of these
Sheesh.
players are in their 30s. Okay. Jesse Vash, I believe, is
Yeah.
like 30, 31. I'm pretty sure Borkum is maybe in his late 20s. I'm pretty sure Dubstep is also in his late 20s. I could be wrong, but I'm
Made me
pretty
feel
sure
young.
that a lot of them are kind of like older for an esports player.
Mm.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, and certainly older players can compete. I will, die on that hill. But I think you're totally correct where it's like they weren't really dominant last year.
Mm.
And I don't really think they did anything to particularly become dominant this year. They didn't make it out of the last chance qualifier. Where did they actually finish last chance qualifier? They went out in lower round 4. So they were like 2 games away from making it.
Yeah.
It's pretty close, but
it
doesn't really seem like they did
else
enough.
in that kind of sphere has got a lot better. Right? The only teams that are staying together are teams that were already competitive on the international level. Those are the only teams that are staying together. Everyone else is forming super teams of the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a team where I could see the roster changing quite a bit over the next like 6 months. But again, there is something to be said about keeping a specific identity, especially when you're trying to build a fan base in a new franchise league. So on that sense, I'll give them a thumbs up because the Philippines goes hard in esports, and you can't really have like a more fanatical fan base than that. But as far as the wins, you got to give the fans something for their fandom, and generally that's like success.
Yeah.
So I'm not really confident that Team Secret will be able to develop or deliver that with their current roster. Okay, let's talk about Talon Esports, also known as former Xerxia, essentially. They basically signed the Xerxia core. They brought in Jit Boys as well. Patapan comes back, so that's pretty hype. And then Garnets as well, who was on 4-7 Gaming before that, X10 before that. Jit Boys was on FW Esports. So I'm not really familiar with either of these two players, but the names you might remember: Cruz, Sushi Boys, Foxy, all there as well.
This team, to me, again, this is like a bit of a KRÜ scenario where it's like you picked up the Xerxia core and that's great, but you left out their 2 best players. In Surf and Scary. So it's kind of like, and Xerxia again, I don't think they got out of a group stage this year either. Like,
where is Scary? He's not on any roster.
Scary is playing for he got signed to Bleed. He took the bag from Bleed, who are trying to win Ascension. Which is fair enough, but for Talon's sake, not ideal. And I don't know what's happening with Surf. But yeah, to me it's like you've got the core of a team that wasn't like, doing well in international tournaments. They were there, but they weren't doing well, and you don't have their best 2 players on that team either. And so it's just a bit like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know much about the 2 guys that they added either, and whether they'll be able to compete. Patifan, we'll have to see how much he even plays. And so yeah, I just don't have a lot of faith, I think, in Talon, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I think the biggest criticism that I had of Xerxia all last year is that they were a team with great structure, very good ideas, but their firepower just let them down in a lot of situations. They were like one of the only teams where I legitimately was like, I don't know if these guys compete on just like a raw firepower perspective to all of the other teams. And so even if your ideas are great, if the other team is just out shooting you every game, that's a huge problem. And adding Patavan is certainly a great step in the right direction. But like you said, they also left off probably their 2 highest firepower players from the Xerxia roster. So did they actually get stronger? Probably not.
No.
Probably not. And that's definitely problematic heading into next year. So I'm gonna go for like a full miss for the GM in this regard, unfortunately. All right, T1. Talk to me about T1, TMV. What is happening with this team?
I love this team. I love this team. Just the absolute culmination of we'll figure it out later. Just like sign just a bunch of correct, hopefully good. You know, you've got Saya, Munchkin, Zeta, Carpe, Ban.
Yep.
I don't watch Overwatch. I don't know if Carpe can play Valorant at all. Don't know what's gonna go on there. Have no idea. Saya's good. Zeta's really good. Munchkin's really good. Ban's pretty good as well. Like it's not a bad team. Like in terms of just like talent level of the team, Carpe being a massive unknown, I don't know if he's any good. You know, the rest of it, I can see like, okay, you've got talent there. There's something to work with. But who this T1 to me are the team where you could tell me that they finish in the top 3 of Sao Paulo, and I believe it. You could tell me that they didn't win a round in Sao Paulo, and I could believe it. Like, and anything in between. They're just like the biggest, like, who knows? Who knows? I think that they got some names, so, you know, that's cool at least.
Dude, what are their roles? That's all I'm saying. I have no idea what's happening with this team. I mean, okay, you've got Ban, most played agent, Jet, 226 games. Second most played agent, Sky, 62 games. You've got Munchkin, also a duelist player. You've got Saya player, also a duelist player. Zeta is playing all the supportive roles. They're going to pick 4 duelists because Carpe is a DPS player from Overwatch, and they're just going to play no smokes, ranked comps every single game.
Well, we know T1 are going to put Saya on smokes. Okay, God. So that prophecy has to be fulfilled again. No, I actually think that Saya will actually be Saya will win the duelist battle, and he will be the duelist player, I think. Or at least the Jet player. I guess Munchkin will be the Raze player.
Yeah, probably. I mean, Munchkin's most played agent is actually Cypher long term.
Well, there you go. Sentinel fixed, done.
I don't know. Byomjun has no official matches, so I don't really know. We don't need a sub.
They literally just found someone off the street.
Okay. Well,
they just someone just said go outside and find someone who you like the look of. Give him the salary for the year.
Who's IGLing on this team? TMV? Who's IGLing?
I don't know. It has an underline under Munchkin here, so I'm just going to assume Munchkin. But I don't know. I don't know these guys.
Okay.
Can Ban speak Korean? I assume so. If
he,
not,
he is Korean. He has a Korean flag next to his name on on VLR, good. So I assume he's a Korean American, or maybe a Korean who moved to America.
Good. Because otherwise that would be problematic.
Yeah, I'm sure that he speaks Korean. Okay, I don't know what else to say about this team. Let's move on. Let's go to RRQ. Rex, Regum, Keon, probably the most hated team in the Pacific League at the moment, and they haven't even played a game here yet.
Yes. EJ, look, to be fair, right? They got a lot of hate early on because they basically just cheaped out and kept their team that was not competitive before, like Team Secret, but worse, by quite a bit. Like at least Team Secret had been to international tournaments. But since then, they did sign Lemmy Moore, Tabitol, Flipshooter, who Lemmy Moore is from Onyx, who were I think that they were the team that lost to Boom in the Last Chance qualifier. So they were pretty close. And I think Lemmy Moore was one of their better players. And so I think that's a good, I would call that a good signing. And Tabitol and Flipshooter, I think are also good players. Yes. So it definitely did get better for them from where they started. You know, if they would have just kept the old roster, I would have been like, yep, what are you doing? It definitely got better. Are they, you know, gonna be competing at the top though? Let's be honest. Probably not.
Probably not. One thing I will say is that their roles look pretty good. Like they have people who have played the roles that are required in pretty much every position without a ton of overlap. There is some, but not as much as some of these other teams. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of those teams where I'm a little, God, this sounds so mean, but I'm a little worried that this might be one of those teams that we see being replaced in partnership. just because they didn't start off on the right foot. They're like, oh, we're gonna keep, because RQ is where are they based? Can't remember. They're a Filipino organization, but then they were like, oh, we're gonna keep our Filipino team, but then they went out and got 3 Indonesian players. So they're like immediately swerving from their initial sort of like value proposition.
Well, that's the problem as well. Team Secret are already a full Filipino team, so it would have been
right.
It makes more sense to go for full Indonesian team because there isn't a full Indonesian team.
Yeah, but now there's nothing wrong with a mixed roster, obviously, but they just didn't enter the partnership with like
they didn't get the brief.
Yeah, they didn't get in on the right foot. I don't know if I've seen any like, heavy content coming out of there, but obviously, yeah, I'm less tuned into the Pacific scene than I am to North America. I'm a little worried as far as like the talent level, the organization, the org structure, that kind of stuff. I know there's some questions about, I don't want to say too much, but I feel like there were some questions about whether the org was like doing the right things as well. It just doesn't seem, if I'm looking at all the teams in Pacific, it's like one of the teams is not like the other, and ARC is kind of that team. But I could be surprised as well. And before I get myself in trouble by slandering one of the teams in the franchising league, let's go ahead and move on to Global Esports, who maybe is the most interesting offseason.
I would say for most of the teams in the other regions, like a lot of what they did was just kind of like, oh yeah, makes sense. Right. But here you just got like, you've got RRQ just imploding, you've got T1 just looking at pure ACS numbers and going, it's gonna be fine. And now you've got Global Esports just literally picking names out of a hat. I don't know what's going on here. They have Monye, who again is from Onyx, who I've seen play again. I think is a pretty good player. Ronsky from Order. Bazzy,
the best Australian team after Bazzy, Sonic moved over.
Of course, Aaron from Exet and Texture. Yep. And it says here Eraser is the coach. Don't know too much about Eraser, but... And then they kept, apparently, SK Rossi and Lightning Fast from their old team, their old Indian team, because, like, we still got to be an Indian org, right? So let's keep SK Rossi. Do Bazzy and Texture even speak English? Does the coach speak English? Does Aaron speak Korean? I'm gonna guess Ronsky. I'm gonna guess if he's Australian doesn't know Korean, so I'm gonna guess that they are gonna speak English. Do these Korean guys know English? Because I know that quite a few Koreans don't know English, so I don't even know if they can talk to each other. Maybe they. I'm guessing that they must. They must know.
I'm pretty sure Bazzy does. I'm pretty sure Bazzy does.
They must do. Otherwise, they wouldn't have signed them. But who knows? God knows what this team will do. God, like, seriously. I said that it's an advantage for teams keeping their cores together, and pretty much every other team, I think, has at least a couple players from, like, the same team. I don't know what they'll do here. Hopefully they just win Sao Paulo. Just because. But I highly doubt it. Don't know what's going on. But good on them, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very interesting move. Okay, so their name is Global Esports.
They quite to that.
Embody their roster.
Yeah.
They have firepower. They have talent. They have some experience with Aaron. I feel like there's going to be a huge weight on Aaron's shoulders in this team to kind of like impart structure and plans in a playbook.
Who put this team together?
I'm also very curious about like the Indian side of it. Like, is SK Rossi going to play? Is Lightning Fast going to get to play? Are the other 3 players who were on GE, Hellranger, Kappa, and Skills, going to be like a second team? That's like the Indian players are kind of like their own team, and they're going to be scrimming like the global team, and then they're just going to like, I don't know, space jam them, become a full Indian org with stealing the talent from the players that they've imported. I don't know what's happening.
Seriously, like, I would have thought, most teams will be built around like the coach knows these guys, the IGL knows these guys, give them a call, you know, can we form a team, right?
Yeah.
That is how I'm guessing most teams have been formed. You know, people who know people. Who knew all of these people? Because they're just from complete. Who from GE is texting Aaron, being like, "Yo, bro, want to come and play in Seoul? Want to move
That was their
across the
first
world?"
signing too. That was really interesting. He was like the first signing for this team,
Yeah.
if I remember.
What? And I'm gonna guess that Aaron doesn't know the rest of these guys either. So he hasn't signed the team. Maybe the coach knows the Korean guys because he's Korean, but God, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Let's just move on. Let's just move on because I don't know. I don't know what to think about them. It's just crazy.
I'm very curious to see how they perform. But yeah, let's go back to like slightly more saneville.
Yeah.
Gen.G has moved from North America to Korea as an org. Well, I mean, they were technically kind of both anyway, so they've just dropped their North American stuff and are going with their Korean office. They have a team of Meteor, Intro, Echo, TS, and King, and have Alma Putty staying on as their coach, a Counter-Strike YouTuber turned coach who has done relatively well since moving over to Valorant.
Does he speak Korean?
I don't know.
Well, that might be a problem. Let's hope so. Because otherwise, these guys are just going to be looking at him like, what the hell are you talking about? They also brought in Bale, though, from Northampton.
Bale.
Let's hope Bale speaks English.
They'll figure it out, man. They've got the sweet Riot Bucks, you know, the stipend that the teams
half of it's going on Korean lessons for our coach.
Exactly.
Okay, this team is like it's like if T1 were a bit more sensible and understood that roles mattered, or at least I think they do. Like, you know, they went out and they got people who play different roles, and you know, it's like DRX, maybe with the exception of Meteor, are basically like just the better version of this team in every single way. And so I think probably likely they'll be like a mid-table, like, you know, they'll be okay. This is a decent attempt at putting together a kind of Korean team, considering, you know, you've got obviously DRX with obviously all like the best Korean players, you might say. Yeah, this is a decent attempt, I think, by Gen.G overall. Assuming their coach can speak Korean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, essentially they went out and they signed Onslayers, right? Because you've got Echo, King, TS all came from Onslayers. Yeah. Meteor coming in from Northampton, and Intro coming in from Reject. He was playing in Japan, but it's also played for a bunch of other Korean orgs. And then the coach from Northampton, who did a great job, you know, bringing that team to a pretty good success last year as well. So I'm actually pretty satisfied with this team coming together. I think, again, it's going to be kind of the same story where it's like it's the Korean team that's just not as good as DRX, but maybe they will. You know,
I'm going to tell you right now, there's no way they're as good as DRX. But they could be okay.
They do have firepower for Meteor, but yeah,
they could be good.
I would agree.
I don't think they're a bad team. I think they'll do decent in the Pacific League. Sao Paulo, maybe it might take a bit of time, but when the Pacific League kicks off, I actually think they could do decently.
Yep. Okay, let's go to full-on Sanityville. We've got DRX. We've got the same roster. They've added 2 more, what I would assume are Jet players. Let me just verify real quick. Let's see, Foxy9. Yep, most played agent was Jet. And Bane, let's see, Bane, most played agent was also Jet.
Now, here's the thing about DRX. So they have the same team still, but in their recent games, Foxy9 was playing, and RB was playing solo.
Okay. So who is Foxy9 replacing? Buzz?
He was replacing Zest.
Really?
In the last couple of games. And I don't know if this is like Zest was just unavailable for like these little things that they've been doing, like these invitationals type stuff. Maybe it was that, right? And he just wasn't there. But if you go on those games and take a look at the stats, like this Foxy 9 kid is I mean, I know he's playing Jet, but like, you know, he's doing okay. It doesn't look like he's, you know, doing bad. So they actually could just have a legitimate 6-man roster potentially going on as well. But I mean, it's the RX. I trust them to do well. They kind of were lacking, I think. I mean, Buzz is obviously a very good Jet player, but even at times I feel like he was inconsistent as well. But I like Zest as a player. I'd be bummed
Me
if
too.
Zest didn't play, because I thought he was a really good player and a good role diversity as well. So look, DRX, I trust them to do well. They're going to be one of the favorites going into Sao Paulo because they've kept things the same and they're a really good team, and they should be one of the favorites because they're really good.
Yeah, you're right. So I'm looking at some of these games, and Foxy 9 was playing Jet, Buzz was playing Killjoy and Fade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Zest is that I feel like he added some like very like much needed sort of like I don't know if he was older or what, but he just he seemed to be kind of like the stable player on their team.
Yeah, you've got Stacks going crazy next to him, and he's just like sitting there just still.
Yeah. But I do know that he initially left the roster because he had some health problems. So hopefully that's not happening again. But maybe he just can't play as much. And I mean,
who knows?
At the very least, this team has enough coaching staff and enough structure to take whatever Jet players they want to pull out of the Korean pubs and turn them into great team players. So even if they do replace Zest, I'm not that worried. But I do question some of the consistency of the players, specifically Buzz and RB. But RB was pretty darn good last year. He kind of like stepped up at Champions, and I still think that Mako is just straight up like the best Smokes player in the world. So, pretty excited to see them play.
They're gonna be good.
Okay, let's go to our final team, which is Detonation Gaming.
Oh boy.
This is an interesting one, and their roster is kind of all over the place. Zinfree, Takage, Suggest, Anthem, Seoldem, and Reta as their sub. It's a mixture of Japanese and Korean players on a Japanese org. We've got the likes of Takage, who's been an incredibly skilled player, but hasn't really seen that much success, formerly of Zeta, then Reject. Zinfree from Northeption. Anthem, was he also on Northeption, or he was on, who was he on last year? He was on Reject as well.
Yeah.
And then we've got Korean Jet, Seoldem, all the montages of the right click before it was nerfed, and then Suggest. If there's one player, two players. If there's two players I'm very excited to watch, it's Takage and Suggest. Suggest, I feel like kind of got the short end of the stick. He was on New Turn, right? And then they kind of collapsed. And then he went to a couple other orgs, ended up on Detonation. Very, very good player. Very good. He's kind of like a Stacks-esque player where he has incredible firepower from the support role. So I'm happy to see him play again, but I really just don't know what to expect out of this team.
Yeah, again, I think the teams that keep the cores together are going to have an advantage at the start. This is going to be one of those teams where they don't have that advantage at the start. And the talent isn't bad, but is it, you know, the thing is the talent to me isn't like at the level of the top teams, right? That's the thing for like a team like T1. Their talent is unbelievable. And if it all goes right, who knows what they could do, right? Whereas with a team like this, it's like, it might take a bit of time to actually get there. And then even when you get there, are you going to be competing at the very, very top? I don't think so. So for me, it's a bit like, you know, you've got a mixed Japanese Korean roster. You've got a team that, you know, has talented players, but maybe not like top tier players. Maybe they could surprise, but I'd be surprised. And it might take a bit of time as well. I just don't know if it's there, to be honest, for this team.
All right, I'm going to take the slightly contrarian road here. I think that their firepower is good enough to compete with pretty much everybody in the Pacific League. Maybe not internationally, but certainly in the Pacific League.
Okay, yeah. I was talking more about like Sao Paulo, like at that first tournament.
Okay.
Like you look at T1's roster and you're like, who knows, right?
Yeah, but I don't even want. Don't make me look at T1's roster again. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see
take
it.
like Paper X, DRX.
Sure.
Are they on that level firepower?
I think it's closer than you would think.
Okay.
I do think it's closer because I think
You probably
Takajay
know
is
more about these players than me, to be fair.
I think Takajay is one of the most mechanically skilled players in Japan. I think Zinfree is also up there.
Oh yeah.
I don't really remember Anthem that much, but then I do know that Suggest can certainly shoot with DRX, and Seoldem, more known for the montages, but also had quite a bit of success.
You have to hit those shots to get montages.
Yeah, exactly. He had quite a bit of success when he was playing Sky, even on whatever kind of like pickup team he was on, that didn't quite make it, but was definitely kind of challenging some of the teams for like challenger spots last year. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this team develops. Actually, I'm pretty interested. I don't really know how the roles are going to shake out, but I would be willing to be surprised by Detonation Gaming next year.
Look, if Valorant has taught me anything, it's that the skill levels are all incredibly close, and so
yeah,
probably any team that we are writing off as they won't be competitive probably will be very competitive, because there's a reason no one has won 2 Valorant tournaments, and it's because everyone is in the big old mess. Everyone is almost exactly the same level, and maybe just 1 or 2 little things make the difference. And so
exactly,
that's probably where all these teams are in reality.
Perfect. So with that being said, there's now 2 hours of probably terrible takes for you guys to clip and send to us in a couple of months, and let us know in the comments below who you think is going to be the best team next year. Any other closing words, TMV, before I let you go?
Not really. I just look at these teams and I just think that if you're an NA fan, unlucky, because I got news for you. Leviatan are the best team in the Americas League, and Leviatan would be the 9th best team in EMEA. So that's all I've got to say, really.
Yikes.